Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, yes, as said, what is happy hour for some is morning coffee for others, right? So this is how we roll in the global community. So hi everyone, my name is Juha. I'm the business lead for North America with Valo. Who's Valo? We're a digital workplace solution built on top of Microsoft Office 365 platform. In our offering, we have tools that are now more important than ever in the current situation we're in. So we have Valo Intranet, a modern turnkey internal communication solution built on top of SharePoint and soon also available natively inside Microsoft Teams. We have Valo Teamwork for the governance and lifecycle of Microsoft Teams and Office 365 groups. We have Valo Ideas, an amazing and popular ideation and innovation tool, which we now recently rebuilt for Microsoft Teams platform natively. And we have Valo Entrance for the management of external users in Office 365. So yeah, for us, it's been a great journey so far. We have more than 700 customer companies globally. And in North America, we also have a solid status nowadays with local presence here, some 200 customers hereabouts, and a recent recognition as the intranet choice for North America in the latest Intranet in a Box study by Clearbox. But Valo is a lot more than a product. It's a community of like-minded people with similar challenges and similar problems to solve. And this Valo Fest going on right now is one of the embodiments of that community, really. So I'm here just to kick off the show and give you a very warm welcome to the North American portion of this Valo Fest event, an event following the sun for a full 24 hours. So this event is for anyone wanting to improve their skills with the digital workplace, to hear success stories, to hear how others are navigating through these exceptional times, turning challenges into opportunities. We will have an amazing lineup of speakers and sessions today, divided into two tracks, the experiences track and the solutions track. So the experiences track is more about soft skills and customer success stories, whereas the solutions track is mainly about technology and innovation. So I hope you find your way to those tracks. This keynote session going on right now is a so-called Teams Live event. And after this one, you will then move on to either the experiences track or the solutions track, which are separate Teams meetings, meaning there's one very long Teams meeting in place for both tracks. And so I will put a join link to the chat right here during Mark's speech, so you can follow that one. Feel free to get in touch with us if you can find the invitations or need a hand otherwise. So without further ado, let me introduce our keynote speaker. We're very honored to have Mark Kashman, Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. Mark will show in this demo-rich session how Microsoft Teams, the hub for collaboration and internal communications, is transforming the way people work. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing good. How are you, Juha? Thank you for the
Very
nice
well.
intro. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, everything here is flowing good. The machine is humming. It seems like your event is off and running. The Twitter sphere is buzzing. I'm ready for sharing the Valo love from the United States here.
Awesome. So without further ado, enjoy your day, everyone. And Mark, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Juha, and thank you, Valo, for a great event. It was an honor to be invited. I know that there's a lot that's already happened in the EU from the time zone perspective. We're now starting off and kicking off the Americas. Again, really pleased to be here, whether it's your morning, your afternoon, or your evening. I have a lot to show, and my one promise is that I maybe barely, but I really will try not to show any PowerPoint. But we have a lot of information to get across. And my hope is, because we're talking about Microsoft Teams plus SharePoint, and really that connection of the content services and a lot of different types of content and what you can achieve for better teamwork inside of Teams, is to really show you that value of SharePoint in Teams. But the meta point is I will be mostly showing you only Teams. I'm going to minimize a few things. And I might have to click out of a couple things because I'm in a few instances of Teams here. But I really want to get started. I like to share a lot around what you can do with files, pages, news, sites, everything, but it wouldn't be without the Valo hat. So if you're ready, follow me into Microsoft Teams. Here we go. All right. where I want to start is really first to introduce what it is that we're here to talk about today. There is a lot going on at Valo Fest. I'm here in the Valo Fest team, which is what I created here at Microsoft, different from what you're using for the conference today, just to be clear. And I set up a few things that I want to walk through so you can see all of the different ways that you can collaborate and the different ways that Teams and SharePoint enable you to stay connected with content right alongside the conversation. But I'm here on the general channel in my Valo Fest team. And of course, there's been a lot of buzz and a lot of things going on about Valo Fest. I've been looking forward to it for a while, so I've been letting the team know. We had some activity on Twitter. You saw that image there that we shared out. But as we go, we know that it's going to be a busy day today. There's 24 hours, already started 8 hours ago. So we're about a third of the way through, and there's a lot more to come. I'm, again, focused on this keynote. I'll share more about that. We'll talk about Microsoft Lists as well in terms of their role in not only SharePoint, but within Microsoft Teams as well. And so first question you might be asking is, who is this Mark Kashman guy, and what is he doing here? If you've followed a little bit of what I've been doing, I mostly focus on SharePoint and Teams, but I also recently focused on Microsoft Lists and all the goodness that comes when you start building apps and experiences in SharePoint or now more and more within the user interface of Teams. So I thought first we could learn about who this Mark person is. He is a senior product manager here at Microsoft. And if you've seen my bio on the Valo site, certainly you can already see this. But I wanted to start to show how I can build experiences in SharePoint, but then bring them into Teams as tabs at the channel level. And so what you're seeing here is just a simple page that I put together that has a little bit of information. I have a video out there that talks about all the things you can do with SharePoint and Teams, a little bit about myself, that I work at Microsoft. And as you see kind of traveling through here, if you didn't see my video when we first popped on, this is me with the Valo hat without the beard. So a little bit of a different time. But on the side of where you can follow what it is that I'm doing, I'm here using the quick links web part on a SharePoint page and exposing it inside of Teams as a tab. So I often blog through the SharePoint blog, Twitter at mcashman with a K. I have a podcast that I run with Chris McNulty, my peer, called The Intrazone. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. Sometimes I post there, mostly to engage with the community and network. And then certainly I'm always available via a bunch of different ways through email and lots of different ways to get connected and reach out to me. Certainly today I'm using the Twitter web part to highlight some of that activity, and it's just as easy to put on the page that you can see here, and you'll see that a couple of times on how I'm leveraging web parts to communicate, but really to put it in context in a single experience so that I can communicate effectively with my team and bring it into the spaces that I need. So before the event, we created a fun video to advertise, and it's something that if you saw it, it was just me here creating an asset. Now it's in Microsoft Stream. And here it is to experience again right inside of the user interface. And some of what I'll show you here are parts and pieces, and I really want to show you how you can communicate effectively with just one asset, or certainly you can focus on rolling it up and really creating mini dashboards, which I'll show you in a second. So moving beyond video and how that comes across, I'll show you in more detail when we get to the lists section. But this is a new Microsoft list, which is an evolution of SharePoint lists. And I recreated the entire agenda for the Valo event. So you probably already know the sessions that you want to go to. But here in line as a tab in Teams is just that. It is the entire event. So what I want to narrow down to is if you look here, and I can go into filter down, and I'm just going to try to see if I can turn off some notifications just for a moment here so that those stop popping up. So give me a second here. So this is a list that I created. I was using the event itinerary to make it possible. And just to show you that it's a real list, I want to filter down just by keynotes. And you've already seen one with Karin. And now we're here. This is my keynote that has title, description, and all the goodness. And then last but not least, at the end of the day, is my peer, Lori Pottmeyer, who will be given a keynote about You Asked Microsoft Team Answers. And I reached out to her via chat to ask her about her meeting, and some of her response I'll show you in a little bit later. But as you can see, we've got 3 keynotes. When Juha was opening up the event, if you filter down and look at the different types of events, there's the solution track, there's the experience track, of course, there's the happy hours and welcomes. But if you look across the day with keynotes, there's over 38 sessions, and they're all easy to track here in this list. I had mentioned that I wasn't going to show PowerPoint, but I'm only going to show it here once, just to have a little bit of fun. But I'll go into a slideshow so we can see a little bit bigger, not too big, and just have a little fun because you saw me wearing a Valo hat. I want to make sure that you can see me always wearing a Valo hat. And this is the only PowerPoint that I'm going to show you. So commonly I would have showed you a bunch of different slides, but I want to show you all that information right here in Teams. So what does it look like then to bring all that information together in one single pane? We saw video, we saw lists, we saw a PowerPoint, we of course saw a little bit of who I am, and I built out a page that really brings that all together, which is really that value of SharePoint inside of Microsoft Teams. And I'm going to do a couple of things. I want to expand it so I can see this full page in all of its glory. And really in SharePoint, I'll show you this towards the end on how you can build a page. But this is a page, Teams Love SharePoint, and it can't be more than that. This is the title and description of this session. I have put links for other people on my team if they want to join into the Valo experience. They can read about the agenda, they can learn about the great speakers, and of course they can contact the team if they have information. So this is just a quick links web part. This is just one of the assets that the Valo team provided so that I could be a little bit more active on Twitter and share my presentation and certainly advertise it. This is that video that I showed you, so it's now embedded in the experience. We got the Twitter feed here now coming from Valo, one of their YouTube videos. This is the full Valo Twitter feed. This is that presentation I was telling you about. I've programmed it when you land on this page to show page 2 because we've already seen page 1. And if I were to click through, you would see that a lot of this presentation focuses on the value of Teams, how you can communicate, collaborate, and of course bring in a lot of these other experiences as tabs. And first party to that is what you can do with SharePoint, which is pretty much everything I'm showing you. But there's a lot that you can do to customize and extend Teams. And beyond Teams, of course, there is that ability to then work directly in a SharePoint team site. Some of what I'm showing you today starts in SharePoint, and then the experience is in Teams. But more and more, our goal is if you're adopting Teams, if you're starting to get comfortable in Teams, you're chatting, you're sharing files, we want you to move beyond that and really get that notion of being able to create content inside of Teams, or, of course, for a period of time to be able to pull in the content that you need from Microsoft first-party applications and, of course, third-party applications. Team sites are one of those default apps that is connected to Teams. And so here on the team site, you can create a team site in seconds. You really get what in a IT perspective is that container for sites, pages, lists, news, and of course the ability to build productivity apps if you leverage out-of-box forms and flow or manage things with the Power Platform with Power Apps for custom forms and Power Automate for custom flows. And you can do all of that, set it up, and really the value is then bring it into Teams and have a unique app experience on a tab in a channel right there at the fingertips of the rest of your team. Of course, there's a lot that you can do with SharePoint beyond collaboration, and we'll save that for some of the other sessions later today. But really the value here is the role of SharePoint in team sites and being able to then see the value they bring. Of course, there's a lot of other things around the value of working with files, working with lists. I'll show you the new Microsoft Lists app, and then everything you can do beyond that to really build a great experience. If you saw these cycling through, this is just an image gallery, and then below is that same agenda list that I had, but now embedded in the page. We have a list web part that really enables you to not only get a full page of the list, but to really put it into context. We're talking about Valo Fest, and we want to see here the agenda. And this, again, is a fully functioning ability to use your list right here in line, navigating down to the keynotes, navigating in, and showcasing that one single item. So if I continue to scroll the page, I thought we'd end just on a fun, if you know, and of course love, some of the Valo Love team members, the hat is always one of the key cruxes that you're talking to Valo, you're talking to the right people. And from around the world, either things that I stole on Twitter or things that I got to, of course, engage with directly in person when we were last in person in this world. A lot of great Valo Love, great hats. And certainly a lot of experiences there with the people that you know, and of course, a lot of them you'll hear from today. So this is, I think, a great way to start this setting context if you get a sense of what you can do. And the rest of the time, I really want to show a little bit more of the parts and pieces and the value that they bring with this broader toolkit of how you can work with different types of content and how you can showcase your information, but really then to get down to that collaboration space so that you can collaborate effectively with each other right alongside the content without switching context, without having to go to different apps. And there's a lot that you can do in Microsoft Teams, especially if you haven't yet got beyond the chat and the files, which is really the first entry point. But as you dig deeper, there's of course a lot that you can do. So Valo Fest rocks. Let's continue to move on. I'm going to move out of expanded mode and start to get us over to talk about files. So if you've used Microsoft Teams, you know that the default tabs are posts and files. Sometimes you'll see it listed as chats. And the value here is this is our first integration with Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. And a lot of people don't know, but if you do, really to reiterate that when you go to the Files tab, you're actually seeing a window into that default connected SharePoint team site document library, which might be a mouthful, but it really is the real core value and the transparency that we want to provide of where am I storing these files, what's giving me these capabilities that I see. So when you go to a Files tab in any channel on any team, you really are seeing that main document library container. And that could be the one and only default one because you created it new and that just happens to be where you've put your files. Or it might have been over time, you started with just a team site before Microsoft Teams existed. And now we have the ability to connect the two so that you can connect and up-level a team site to be group connected to a Microsoft 365 groups list or a membership. And with that, now you can connect it to Teams, which gives us this experience that I'm going to walk you through. So on this particular channel, we're now in the Files channel, just to be clear. So Files, a little bit duplicative. And what you're seeing here is a set of files that I'm working on with the team that works on files or to showcase what you can do with files. So first you can see I've pinned a few at the top. This one is just a movie. It's an MP4 of one of our case studies. This is actually a representation of a thumbnail of a CAD file. And if I were to click into it, you'll see that within the user interface, it'll load up, which is a deep layered .dwg file from working in CAD. But right here, we render it as a nice preview. And of course, at the thumbnail level, you'll be able to see that across 320 types of different files. The last one here just being a simple image file. But there are 320 types that are now going to render beautiful thumbnails right here within the user interface. And right now I'm in the All Documents view. I can switch over and see all those files now being rendered as previews. So that's part of the value of this new files experience, which is really just giving you a better experience when you work with your files. You don't need to know that it's SharePoint. You don't need to know the common value of how we're making this a consistent experience no matter where you work with these files. But the last point that I want to make here is it is a single source of truth. This is not a copy of the files. This is a really smart and dedicated window into working with your files with technically the same control so that you can do things like create new documents. So if we wanted to, we can create a new Word document and give it a name. We'll give it Valo Fest. And now this is going to be a new asset that we can create right here. And I'll just add one element so we're quick here. I'll just insert a picture from my device. And if I go to my quick, put in the Valo logo, And now we're starting a new document. And really the value of once that's saved is I have a new asset that's here inline. You see it here, Valo Fest document. And I can do things like make this a tab. And of course, I can start to collaborate and share. So when I make this a tab, I'm actually dedicating a full document to render with the Office Online technology here using Word for the web. And you see that I can continue to work and point people to here and even start a conversation side by side so that I can call to attention with my friend Lori that we've started a new asset and I just need her help. So that'll now start a new chat in this channel linked to this document, and at any time I can always go back to it. I'd mentioned before that I had created a video that really hones in on a lot of things that you can do with files. So if you want to see a little bit more on how to work with files and go a little bit deeper, this really takes you through some of what I'm showing today, but also covers a few more things. I'll just direct you to that. But at the same time, I also want to show you when you're talking about files, you may be referencing things that you learned in training, things that you learned across the intranet or even in the internet. So as I start clicking on more and more things, you're going to see that I can really assign a lot of different content types beyond SharePoint in the topic that we're talking about here. But really, if it helps set the context and helps move the conversation forward, you can certainly do that. I've already pinned another asset. This is a little bit more of a finished document that's stored in that same files tab, which is really in that same document library for the files folder. And I'm now getting this rich ability to, of course, add different formatting. I can work on things. Certainly I can associate and do grammar check. I can pull in a lot of rich content. And of course, it's just full on the value of what Word enables, but right there, right in line with what you can do inside of Teams. The last thing I want to show you is as you bring in more assets that might be just a reference to your team, you can really pull from anywhere. So anytime you want to add a new team, and I'll show you this a couple of times with the different content types, here I am to go add a team, a document library, but not just the default one. So it's going to pull initially from relevant sites, or I could go in and plug any SharePoint URL. And I'm just going to go into show you a little bit on how and what you can do, but then I'll move on, beyond moving this in. So this is just me navigating to what available document libraries are in this team site that I've recently used. Here is that parent level default document library, different from the Valo Fest site that I'll show you distinctly at the end. But it really is just another useful document library. It could be a set of video assets. It could be a set of pre-sales materials that I want to make sure everybody has. And I'm working with a new team in the European sales department. And I really want to just showcase a set of assets that's managed by another team, but I want to bring it in, and it just happens to be a set of documents. So I can bring in from throughout the intranet, not just limited to this channel. So if I click next, it's going to add that as a new tab in Teams. So moving on, if that's kind of the core element that by default, not only was it our first integration with Microsoft Teams and how SharePoint came together, at that point it really was abstracted. There wasn't really this notion of a connected SharePoint team site. But now more and more, not only has the site always been there, but we're really starting to expose in a native way those different content types and experiences that are powered by SharePoint. So the next one that I wanted to talk about was lists.
Mark, sorry?
Yes.
Sorry for the interruption. There's 2 questions now in the questions and answers. So,
sure.
Would you like to take them now or at the end of the presentation?
Let's take them now. If they're certainly if they're in context, I'd prefer to take them now.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just read them out loud if that helps. So first one is, so each team would have a folder of files within SharePoint.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question.
Yep. So just to show you what I've been showing you in any of these channels, so I'm in a variety of channels as a part of the Valo Fest team, which has a connected team site. I was going to show you this at the end, but I think better to visually show you. This is that connected team site. A lot of what I'm showing you and clicking through tabs comes from this site. It's called the Valo Fest. It's currently set as a private group with just 2 members. But of course, I could invite a lot of people and I could use a lot of security trimming and governance. And I created this site on my own here at Microsoft because the IT department allowed me to. But to answer the question, here is that documents library. And in the documents library, even though I haven't showed you all of these channels, we were just on the files channel, and each channel creates a folder within the main document library. So we are in that main document library at the parent level. There's the files. If I click into it, this should start to look familiar. Here are those assets pinned at the top. I have all the same capabilities to sync from here. I'm actually getting a notification that this is a folder connected to Microsoft Teams. I could go directly to that channel. And on down, you see that this is the same set of files. And to even prove it, this is a folder that I've created beyond the channel folder. And these are where I stored those assets when I was clicking through the different pictures of the Valo team members. It's just in that subfolder that I created within the files folder channel, which belongs to the default document library that is just the default storage location for everything that this team does if they use it directly. But like I mentioned, you can reference assets from throughout the intranet as long as you have permissions, and of course the rest of your team members have permissions to view it. If you don't, and you're not one of these two members right now, you wouldn't be able to see the content. So there's always permissions and governance in place. But hopefully that answers it. It is the default document library in the SharePoint team site Valo Fest that then piles through the Teams user interface, and per channel it's then a distinct folder of files. And I'll show you that a couple times to reiterate that. But hopefully that answers that question.
Awesome. Let's hope so. And there's another one here that is also nicely related to what we're talking about right now. So let's take that one as well.
Let's do it.
The question is, should we have custom columns other than the default title modified and modified by in the Files tab to be able to filter, sort on? Thanks.
Yes, the answer is yes. And the half answer is we're making progress. So we know that there's a lot of value in the core aspects of lists, and I'm cheating to get into the next topic. But the real value of a document library is the structure of all the columns and rows. It just happens to be that there's that extra bit of the file, which is of course is not just a file attachment, but it's really the record of that row. But a document library has a list in terms of the metadata that you track, and it's a default set of columns. You can add custom columns, and that is something you can do in SharePoint, and only a few of those come through in Teams, but we are working on making sure that any column, any custom metadata that you add, and of course the logic and views and the flows that you might build off of that is something that would come to the new files experience. But to also be very clear, we're not quite there yet. We've indicated that that's our plan. In this list segment that I want to get into, I'll show you some of that value of working with custom metadata and the custom columns, and really think about that as the core lists infrastructure that also is used by a document library. So that same capability, we always talk about lists and libraries when it comes to columns, customization, workflow, metadata, being able to track and visualize color coding with our column formatting or row formatting. So it all applies, and more over time, it'll already be in SharePoint, and a lot of that experience is coming to Microsoft Teams. To the files experience, we've just updated that with the new files experience, but it's not complete, and we're making progress. When I show you this next section around lists, you'll see the progress that we've made in that native control of columns and custom metadata. So you'll see at least an indicator of what we're working on in the context of lists, but know that it'll apply to document libraries as well.
Excellent, Mark. I'm wondering if later in this presentation you're going to address the topic of shared calendars, because there's just right now another question that came in related to that.
Yeah, I can. Let's save that till the end, because we'll
Sure.
talk a little bit around the other things that groups get. The focus of this talk a little bit is more around the content and the content service, but right alongside that is, if they're asking about the shared calendar, there is the notion of a shared calendar that gets created by default. And in fact, it was how I was invited to this meeting. It was on my calendar that came from your team. And that was a notion of now everybody who's in Valo Fest is essentially engaging on a shared experience. But specifically, when you create a group, you do get a shared calendar, and that's available to all members to see, to add items to, of course, move things around. And it is an experience that on a SharePoint side, you could embed the shared calendar on a page. and that's something that the team is working on from a team's perspective to be able to visualize a calendar. But we can get more into that a little bit at the end, more to save a little bit of time. But hopefully that starts to answer the question. Sure. So moving on to the topic of lists, and again, I'll try to be clear when we get into the columns, just to finish off the answer to that question. We are currently in Teams, and I'm going to show you a number of different lists, some of them real lists that I use to manage my work with my either marketing peers or engineering peers as we get ready for creating different episodes on the Interzone, working on the roadmap with the lists team. I'll show you some things, and of course one example of some of the new tech. But I do want to switch for a moment outside of Microsoft Teams so I can show you Microsoft Lists. And this is something that we recently announced as an evolution of a SharePoint list and SharePoint lists collectively that will be a parent level offering. If you notice here, I'm on the lists home. And if you look in the upper left, I'm not in SharePoint or Teams. I'm actually in a distinct namespace called lists. And so at Build 2020, a few weeks ago, we disclosed where it is that we're headed so that on this page, as an example of one of the new components, I can see all of my lists. And to be real clear, this is real Mark showing you my real lists home before we start to roll it out to broader production into the public, which is coming soon. But you see here I track and I've favorited a bunch of my lists that I engage with a lot, some of which I created, some of which were shared by me but created by other people. And then down below you can see that I have a list of recent lists, even ones that I've put into my personal storage, which we have, I'll show you a couple examples of. But one of the things I wanted to show you was just what's that list creation experience. If you can see here that my list, when I create a list in my list, that puts it into my personal storage. I'm going to create a new list. You can see here that I have a number of templates to choose from. Those are new with Microsoft Lists, but I can also start from scratch with a blank list. We just recently announced the release out into production, the ability to import table data from Excel. You can still do that, of course, or you can build off an existing list. And I just did this the other day because I work with a couple of different teams. We had already a list roadmap list that I'll show you already set up. And it had a nice set of columns, some nice color formatting in conditional formatting, and just was tracking in the way that we describe our roadmap to work internally. So I used the structure of that list to build out another one for another team that I work on who owns all of what we do for migration and the SharePoint Admin Center. So I built a list off of a list that really just helped me quick start jump into something that I preferred and of course tracked it in the way that I was already doing. But for today, I'm just going to do a quick, simple showcase of how I built the agenda for the Valo that I showed you earlier, that I will show you one more time. But if you go and click through here, you'll see that you get a preview of what these templates bring. You get a description, a title, and as I scroll through here, you see these are all going to be pre-populated columns, not the data, but the columns with the conditional formatting intact, and of course a couple of choices if it's a choice field that you can of course alter and adjust to be whatever it is that you want. But you can see that we have session type, session description, speakers, start times, the duration column, and on. And of course you can add your other custom columns and any other data that you're tracking, but this just helps you jumpstart and getting going. So here we're going to do Valo Fest #2. And we'll choose a color. I'm getting a sense that we should stick with pink or purple, just be Valo-ish. And for this one, we'll make it a beaker just for a little bit of difference. And this is where I mentioned you can put it into my list, which is again using my personal storage within our Microsoft IT tenant. But I'm going to put this list into Valo Fest and then click create. And this is where I'll just showcase this is actually creating a new list to that same team site. And before I even create, I'll first create a new item so you can see what that looks like. And for this session name, I'm just going to use my peer here, my colleague Juha, and we'll give this a code Valo 001. And then these are the pre-configured choices that come with the template. And right here, because we're in the Keynote, we'll make this a Keynote. I can enter a description, anything here, and then start to list out speakers. We'll give Lori another Keynote, and that'll assign her, does an address lookup. The start time, I'll just be quick here, that it'll just be today's date. and we'll get her started in an hour, and then the end date, and you'll see as we go what's happening here. So there's a lot of other things you can fill out. I'm just going to fill out really quickly here. Again, another choice field that was pre-populated. We're in Redmond, so I'll choose Redmond, but of course you can make these anything you want. And then if I had taken any notes here. When I click save, obviously you saw me create the list. I didn't do anything with formatting, and I didn't do anything to make any certain look or feel, but that was already baked into the template. And of course, as I get more and more items here, you'll start to see that we use different color codings for the different choice fields. The capacity, once you start to get a variety of numbers, will show you the different capacity with progress. And at any time, I can, of course, learn more about each individual items with the default form that I can go in, further edit, or even customize with Power Apps. I'll start there just from generating a new list so we don't go too far into creating the list. But what I wanted to show you is now we've got one item in this new list, which is Valo Fest 2. To answer that common question that comes up is, if I chose to create a list from Lists Home, where does it get stored? So I'm back to the Valo Fest team site, and I'm going to go into the site contents, which really gives me a window into everything that's contained within this team site, whether it's a list, whether it's a document library, whether it's a set of pages. I'll get into that towards the end. But you can see here, here's that original list stored in SharePoint, experienced through the Lists Home, or like I showed you before, you can add it as a tab in Teams. But what I really want to show you is that creation from within inside Microsoft Teams. But here's that list. It got put into SharePoint. It meets all the same service level agreement that we have with compliance, with security, and of course, how you govern and manage. It is just a part of your SharePoint site. It's just up-leveled so that you can access all of your lists. But there it is. There's that new Valo list. And to give you a sense, here's what it looks like in SharePoint. And if we go back, here's what it looks like from the lists experience. And if I go in now and add a new list, and I go to what will have a different icon soon, but already today, you can go in and bring an existing list. This will be where you go to create a new list. That's one cheat that I have to show you via a picture, and I'll do that right now. But here's Valo Fest 2 SharePoint list. This is a list of all the lists in this site, or I could add it from any SharePoint site if I have access to it. And when I click save, it'll add that list as a new tab in Teams. And here's that experience working with the data, being able to filter, create views, add new items, everything that I would want to do to be productive here on that list without leaving Teams. I told you I was going to show you what this experience looks like or will look like in Teams. And this is a little bit of my cheat where I want to show you not only that we have a lot of different experiences with lists that are coming to Microsoft Teams. By the end of the year, we'll have a new mobile application and of course, a lot of different ways to start with templates, different views. But we've got a lot of things coming to Microsoft Lists, especially this new experience. This is a screenshot of what it'll look like. You saw me create from Lists Home. This is what it's going to look like when the new Lists app lands inside of Teams. You click plus, and you'll see this to be able to pick and choose across the different templates or start from scratch Excel or from an existing list. So this should look familiar, and it really will be familiar because it's going to be the same control rendered in Teams so that you can start and stay, share and work and collaborate all within Teams on your lists and of course the files that we already talked about. And next up, we'll talk about pages. But let me walk you through what a couple of lists look like and talk about the different scenarios that I'm supporting. This is, of course, we're in the files for the lists channel, but I'm moving now to show you a couple of series of other different types of lists. So clearly here, there are different things that you can do with lists to see and visualize them inside. And here is that chat. I had mentioned that I had reached out to Lori to ask her some questions about her keynote that will be later today. And I asked her, beyond the title and abstract, what's the one thing you want Valo Fest attendees with the broad team and community to take away from your keynote? So she got a notification off of this list. She was able to reference the list if she needed to. She could go in and navigate to her session. Of course, she knows what the session is about. And she gave me this nice answer. Beyond the amazing features we've announced, I want people to walk away realizing Teams is much more than a video conferencing tool. It is absolutely much more than that. It is the center of gravity where you connect with other people real time, but there's so much real and near time experiences with content. And so really nice for her to be able to provide a little bit more insight, but really it showcases this ability for me to work on a list, learn about what she's doing, ask her a question, get feedback, all right here inside of Teams. And again, that value of content, in this case, a list, side by side the conversation. And I sent a heart back thanking her for that, that reply. I, of course, can continue the conversation, and anybody that's a member of this team or engaged in this channel would be able to engage as well. So that's this. You've already seen the agenda for Valo Fest list. So let me show you a couple more. I will have a selfless promotion here, but really want to show you one of the real scenarios that I use, and then another one of how I use lists inside of Teams. And in this case, I work with two people that are external to Microsoft. So in a different team, I reference this particular list, which is all the different episodes that we've done with the Intrazone, which is a podcast all about the Microsoft 365 intranet that I co-host with Chris McNulty. So that's the shameless plug to get there, aka.ms/the Intrazone. But here I'm using a list, and I communicate with my vendor and with my peers and colleagues about the upcoming episodes. And then, of course, I've built into the list some smarts so that when an episode is in the past by date, turn it green, put the icon of the thumb, and then for me as a work item, I go in and actually add the blog that's then live, which I want to show you how I do that. So if I go into expanded mode, and our recent episode was checking in with Jeff Teeper, I'm going to click into that asset, and I'll just sneak over here and grab the URL for that particular blog that has the episode embedded. But this is just a way for me to track the information, and within Teams, again, I'm still within the Teams user interface. I'll paste in that URL, and I just type in blog, or sometimes I type in different things, but it really is just any word that I want to highlight. And when I tab out of that, it'll save it down back to the list. And now you can see that the episode 51, Checking In with Jeff Teeper, now has that new information. And I did it, again, without going to the SharePoint list. It's right here in Teams, and it just happens to be where I do a lot of work with my support team and, of course, my peers for working on the Intrazone. As you can see, we've got a couple of great episodes coming up, and those are just the ways that we manage, again, content side by side with the conversation, directly within Teams, and I can navigate now to get work done to our shared notebook, to our set of files. As we work on scripts and outlines, we build all of that, and it's all contained within the Intrazone, which is what I named the team site, similar to the Valo Fest. So if I go back to unexpanded, and I actually go and show you what the Intrazone looks like, this is that episode, and it's just another way for me to put content side by side and really get that value of Teams. And I can even start a conversation on a public asset if I'm referencing to the team. The episode is now live. Let's make sure to follow up with Jeff, send him a thank you email. Let's post into LinkedIn. Let's do all the normal things we do to then advertise. And people can go here and grab any of the links. If they want to mention Jeff on Twitter, this is where the team comes to grab his Twitter address. And this is just really all of the show links. But to keep us moving, one other thing that I wanted to highlight is I talked about how we manage the roadmap with the list team. This is not the full Microsoft 365 roadmap. This is just a real focus on things that I manage directly with the list team, or what is part of the SharePoint engineering team. And if you've seen some of the videos that we've done, you may know Michaela Barrett. This is me, of course, working with Michaela, Lincoln, John, and other people like Niket Jain, and some of the people that you might know like Chikaradeep Chandran, who you know might have known as Chax. But I can, of course, learn more about the people. This is for me to track what is the item, who do I need to work with, what part of this are we advertising it as, when is it coming, has it released yet? So this is a pretty straightforward list. And again, it has that smarts built in where I can mark things as released so we know that they're out and in production, fully launched. As I scroll down the page, you'll see I list things as normal if we've already disclosed them, or I can start to list things, either some things that we know maybe are tracking on a different date, so we need to update the roadmap. That's what this is indicating to me. So I will update that with Michaela. And for today, I just reset this so you can see some of the logic. If it falls beyond today's date or before and has not been set to a different status here in disclosure, it'll give me basically an error or what looks like a call to attention. But to have a little fun, let's go into disclosure and filter by first build 2020, which is when we announced Microsoft Lists. And this is really everything we announced by Microsoft List. And these are the real people that I'm working with and really how I work with them in terms of tracking items that are part of our roadmap before we put them on the public roadmap, that we have awareness, that we've agreed on name and title, and of course the date, which is always important. So this is Build 2020. We've disclosed all this. I can point you to more information to learn more about lists. The easiest way is to go to aka.ms/mslists, and that will take you to our new resource center. But just to tease it out a little bit, what if we were to go to disclosure and filter by what we're talking about at Ignite? Ignite 2020. Should I hit apply? I think I might have to pause on that because, well, there's just a few things we haven't yet disclosed. So this list has a lot of great information, but I wanted to show you this is a real active list. The final one, and I'll be real quick here, is just a lot of the different ways that you can make things look and feel. Obviously, we're talking about lists, so there's a lot of value, a lot of ways to customize your columns, customize the look and feel, work with images. So if I click into this asset, you'll see that we're using the new image column where I can upload an image. Of course, I can work with it. I can edit it, update the image just like it would update any information. And as I click around again, I haven't left the user interface. I started this with the new template called the Asset Manager, and it gave me all of these standard columns, the color formatting. I just adjusted a little bit around what it says, and of course I updated some of the manufacturer information. But again, this is a list like any other that I can group, just to show you one other feature, by manufacturer, and it's a real functional list inside of Teams, giving me the ability to group and filter. So I want to group by manufacturer and filter by assets that are available for me to then check out. And if I navigate through here, I can click into one item, and if I wanted to, this is where I could start a chat with the person that's listed here as the owner and ask them to be able to check out that item, or that's just this scenario. So moving on from lists, I want to make sure that I covered everything I had hoped to.
There is a question online.
Yes, of course.
Let's waiting for it, just in case your session was going to like self-explain, self-answer that one. But
yeah,
let's take
no,
it now
please
anyway.
do. Let's take it.
Thanks to the attendee for the patience. So the question is, what is the different use cases for Planner versus Microsoft Lists?
Great question. So the easiest way for me to answer is Planner is very much focused on Teams tasks. You know, tasks that you have assigned to different individuals, and it gives you the ability to assign a date, an individual, and move that through the life cycle of the task. Commonly, when the task is done, you check it and the task is then gone from view and you move on. But it really is a distinct content type, the task. And Planner is really an aggregate, if you see your view, of all the different tasks that you might have assigned to yourself in the context of a team project or project planning, or of course that other people might have assigned to you. But if you think about it, Planner has a distinct user interface and a distinct set of fields that you track. It's not really a form that you can customize. It's not something that you can connect to other sources, and it really is focused on that task management. With lists, our focus is around work management or tracking information that really may have nothing to do with a task. Like I showed you, there was that asset management list. That intent is to show you we may have an inventory of 500 items that are often checked in and checked out by various team members. Sometimes those have asset tags. Sometimes it's associated to a truck delivery system if those assets are checked out to a driver of a truck. If you get the sense, I'm never actually checking off the item to then disappear from my view. I'm changing the status. I'm having different flows triggered if an asset gets checked back in. that may trigger a flow for the IT department to check the device, to make sure that it's good, to refresh it for the next person who then is going to check it out. It also is going to send a notification that we have a new asset available, and maybe it will change a list of availability so that if somebody needs a new device, they can return it, pick up a new one. But all the while, we're tracking information, oftentimes in the hundreds or thousands, across maybe hundreds or even more people, and that's changing all the time. And that's just one example of a list type. We also can track issues. You may have a set of FAQs that changes year over year or quarter after quarter as technology updates. You may update the FAQs but mark them as final, which then goes through maybe a review process that is just a simple email notification, and on through to very complex style list where you might actually have a column populated by another list, or you might actually have a workflow that goes and pulls information from an external source like an SAP type system or an external database that just populates it when a certain status is hit. And all the while, it really just looks like a list. You can customize the form, you can customize the look and feel, you can create views for different audiences with different permissions. There's lots of flexibility to lists. There's, of course, a lot of different ways to connect and have different sources to lists. But I think the biggest differentiator, if that all lands a little bit in explaining, it's the difference between task management for your team and work management, which is broader in the types of information that you would track. And side by side, they are meant to complement each other so that you have a great place to manage tasks and project plan, but you also have a great place to go to navigate to. And looks like I need to sign back in here. Give me 1 second. But hopefully that answers the question. You can give me feedback if that did.
Right. You know what? There's 2 more questions regarding lists. So
okay,
we have a
take
couple of minutes.
Let's take them quickly, and then we'll round off with talking about pages.
Okay. So first one is, where will my personal lists be stored?
Yep, great question. When you use OneDrive as an example, your personal files that you have in OneDrive before you start talking about shared libraries are stored in your personal storage, which is based on SharePoint. So all of the storage for lists, for pages, for document libraries, and of course the files themselves are based on SharePoint. And Microsoft List, when you introduce this ability to have your own list, is very similar to OneDrive, where you've got a set of documents that you have ownership and nobody else has access to them until you share them. That same notion of personal storage will apply to Microsoft Lists when you list it as your own list, which just means it's a set of permissions set on content stored in SharePoint that's only available to you until you share it. Different from when you choose to put it into a team space, the value of everything I've been showing you is anybody that I add as a member to this team, or if I enter a team space that already has hundreds of members, we equally have access to all of the content that's stored within that same SharePoint container, which is the pages are available to me, the lists are available to me, the site itself is available to me, and if I need to go create new news articles, pages, new lists, new files, I'm already sharing it with my team. I actually don't need to share it. It's already shared with those members. But again, back to the question, it's my personal storage within Microsoft 365 that's based on SharePoint in the exact same way as OneDrive. What was the second question?
Second question is, there's more questions coming in, but the second one was, when is lists going to be available?
Great question. So a really good indicator is I'm able to show you real lists home. That wasn't a mock-up. That wasn't an early code. That was actually really what we're starting to dog food here at Microsoft, which is commonly an indicator that they're getting ready to release. And so I can't give an exact date because that would blow some of my news, but I can tell you that we're within weeks because of the progress that the team is making. And in this last mile, we do a lot of final testing at the scale of Microsoft and some of our early adopters that are in some of our early adoption programs. So the technology is real. A lot of people are finding little issues in the bugs, and of course the security is all being checked. So it'll be introduced soon. We talked about it coming during this summer, and we're on track. And there are some components that will come sequentially. So there will be a set of components that will be new, and then there'll be a couple of additional sets on a monthly basis. And to be real clear, we had introduced the new Lists mobile app And that is one thing that we know based on our trajectory that we will have at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. But we will definitely start to release a lot of components here soon. List home and the templates is one of our first assets. And then shortly after that, the ability to do all of it within Teams, which again, they're making great progress. And today I showed you a mock-up, but very soon, in about a month's time, is where I would actually be able to show you a demo because I know the progress that they're making. So the answer I know nobody likes to hear is it's coming soon, but the indicator is it is available to me to demo for real, which is the first ring of release, not public yet, but within the Microsoft IT tenant, which is where I'm at. I'm signed in as Mark Kashman at Microsoft, not in a demo tenant. This is real code and everything that I'm showing you.
Okay, awesome. The rest of the questions, there are some coming in, but let's take them offline, okay? So we're going to ask
That
them
sounds
you
good.
offline and then send the answers to the attendees. There's only a couple of minutes left, and we want to start wrapping up. So we'll give you, let's say, 2 minutes, and we're going to also want to have a couple of minutes to let the people then find the next session, right? So go ahead, Mark.
That sounds great. So mainly what I'm showing you here is how you work with pages. And the part of the demo that I will save for time is how you create a page. It's very easy to do today within SharePoint. You click new page, you add and configure your web parts, and you start bringing in the content. And really, you'll see it in how I show a couple of different pages. But pages and web parts, and of course, how you configure them are really key to your intranet and how you can build out really dynamic, what I like to frame as mini dashboards. And if you saw in that earlier example, there were a couple of tabs where I had some unique assets, the list, the PowerPoint, and the video, all in separate tabs. But what happens when you really start to bring that into context to tell a story to other people where they maybe don't have to go to a couple of tabs, they just go to a single tab, which is a page, which again is like a mini dashboard that you create, own, and manage, and then easily share and converse around in Teams. So if you click into my first example, this is a real example where I publish this internally, and I do this every month, really to highlight to my engineering team a celebration of what they've released. I usually work with an individual and highlight through our podcast. Here I highlighted my colleague Simon, who works on all things migration into Microsoft 365. And this is just an example of a simple page that I created. I actually published this page as a news article, so it would go out to everybody's SharePoint mobile app. It would go out to their SharePoint start page. It would bubble up into the aggregation of news for the hub site for this broader team. But again, it's just relative news, and it highlights Simon and, of course, a lot of the different innovation that we highlighted and shared that went live that month. But you can see this is an active page. Even when I hover over Simon's information, we have a lot of interactivity, and it works great in SharePoint as a page. But what I'm showing you here is the experience of a SharePoint page inside of Teams as a tab. So this is one real example. Every time I publish the roadmap on a monthly basis, I do an internal news post and call out technology and people that we want to celebrate that month. Another example in terms of how I use pages, this again was another page that I created that I wanted to highlight. I'm going to go in full expanded mode so you can see a little bit more. And this one just has a little bit more complexity of different columns, different rows, different color formatting on the rows. And it comes through here as a beautiful page in Teams, even one that I can navigate. So we talked about the podcast that I manage. These are all the episodes that were released in a given quarter, so 3 months, and highlighting a few of the shows, highlighting some of the people that we talked to. This is a little bit at that time, what was coming next, all this that we've already accomplished, and always a link out so they can go learn more on the public roadmap beyond the scope of what it is they work on. And again, this is just a nice page that I can build. I can have text, I can have videos, I can bring in a lot of different links, and of course, I can communicate and see that my peer Jason Moore reviewed this and had some feedback. The last example, one last example.
The last example, and then we're done.
Yeah, this will be real quick. Just in response to COVID-19, we had created, on behalf of our Microsoft IT, a landing page for everybody at Microsoft to go and see what it is that and how we were responding internally through our work environment. When we could go back to work, which we're not yet, different phases, different emails that are being sent by our executives. And this is a real landing page to which we responded and actually created a site design for crisis communications. And I just wanted to highlight here the use of this, where if I wanted to bring in an asset throughout the intranet, at the end of the day, this is a SharePoint page. It happens to be the home page of a critical communication site, but it was derived off of this, which you could go to the lookbook, lookbook.microsoft.com, and actually get this template and deploy it into your tenant and make it your own. It gives you all this content out of the gate. But the real value here and the endpoint that I wanted to put here is most of what I showed you is a lot of different content types, some of which I created and built within the side of a team site in that context of teamwork. But there's also the notion that there are other assets that may be built on SharePoint that are managed by other people, maybe for broader consumption like employee engagement. And those are just as available to me to be able to bring in. But Juha, if there are one or two last questions that you want to take verbally, I know you want to also transition to the next sessions. So I will just land on certainly thanking everybody for their time. Join in the rest of Valo Fest, and back to the hat. And thank you for hosting and having me today.
Thank you, Mark. That was pretty amazing. This is the future of the digital workplace, front row. And I can see that you really did your homework for Valo. You made the product features work for you here and fit to this event that's happening now and everything around it. So thank you very much for this amazing presentation. I enjoyed it, and I see that many others did as well.
Good. I'm glad. I hope that it gave you a window into the value of Microsoft Teams plus SharePoint, but abstract out of product names, it is how you can work together. We really want them to be seamless experiences, the same as you logged on today to Valo Fest from wherever you are in the world, with whatever intent that you wanted to learn today, from all sessions, from a couple of choice sessions, and of course the content that's going to be shared. No different than what I walk through here in working on a one-to-one, a one-to-few, a one-to-many type scenarios. So I really am honored and thankful for the time that you gave me to share more. I had fun putting together the presentation to mostly stay out of PowerPoint, certainly to share the Valo love, and I really hope you have a great rest of the day, both the attendees and the Valo team that's supporting the event. Thank you for supporting Microsoft and certainly showcasing how we work together with the Valo Intranet that highly complements what you can do on top of Microsoft 365.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much, Mark.